Picture yourself dropped into the middle of the wild, with nothing. No claws, no fangs, no fur, no venom, no shell, no armor of any kind. You can't outrun much, you can't outmuscle much. By the plain math of the savannah, you are about the easiest, softest meal walking around out there. And yet at this very moment, you are the single most feared animal on the entire planet. Nothing else even comes close. I know exactly how that sounds. So I'm going to show you the experiments with real numbers and let the animals themselves make the case. Not the lion, not the great white shark, not the bear, you. The slow, soft, clawless one. A lion's roar makes a zebra lift its head and tense. But your voice, just talking, about nothing, can empty an entire African waterhole in a matter of seconds. Stay with me, because the reason behind that is one of the most quietly unsettling things science has ever uncovered about how the animal world actually sees us. We'll look at the waterhole experiment that proved it, the apex predators who run from our voices, and the animals that aren't afraid of us at all, and why that last group might break your heart a little. Let's start at a waterhole in South Africa, late at night, in the dry season, when water is scarce, and leaving it is the last thing any animal wants to do. Researchers had hidden a speaker out in the bush. When an animal wandered close, it switched on by itself and began recording. No people anywhere for miles. First, they played the sound of lions, snarls and roars from the most powerful predator on the whole savannah, the so-called king of beasts. The animals tensed. A few heads came up, some stepped back from the water. Wary, alert, but mostly they stood their ground. Normal fear of a normal predator. Then on other nights, the speaker played something completely different. Not a roar, not a growl, just the sound of a couple of people, calmly talking to each other. And the waterhole detonated. Animals that had held their ground against the lions turned and bolted into the dark, abandoning the water they desperately needed. This was the work of a biologist named Liana Zanet, who runs a lab devoted to something she calls the ecology of fear, the study of how being afraid reshapes an animal's whole life. And what she found, night after night, was the same result that sounds impossible the first time you hear it. To nearly every animal out there, we are scarier than the lion. Remember what this actually was, a head-to-head test against the lion, the animal we have called the king of beasts for thousands of years, and the lion lost, badly. Now really sit with how strange that is, because a lion is built from bone to claw for one single thing, killing, hooked claws, teeth like carving knives, 40 miles an hour off the mark. Every single thing about a lion is a warning written in muscle. And then there's us. We turn up with soft little hands, flat blunt teeth, no fur worth mentioning, and a slow, faintly embarrassing jog. By every rule the wild runs on, the animals have this exactly backwards. So either thousands of species are simply wrong, or they know something about us we don't much like saying out loud. And here's the detail that truly refuses to fit the easy story. It isn't only the nervous prey animals that fear us, even the great predators do. So let's go back to that experiment in South Africa, because the sheer scale of it is what makes it impossible to wave away as a fluke. Hidden speakers at 21 different waterholes, cameras rolling day and night for weeks. In the end, more than 4,000 separate encounters across 19 species of animal. Giraffes, leopards, hyenas, zebras, elephants, rhinos. And they played them human voices against the sounds of lions, against barking dogs, even against gunshots. The animals were twice as likely to turn and run from the sound of people quietly talking than from any of the rest of it, lions very much included. They abandoned the water roughly 40% faster when they heard us, and almost 95% of all the species tested feared the human voice above every other sound on Earth. Even elephants, animals so large they have no real predator left alive, turned and walked away from the water the very moment they heard us speak. Not the gunshots, not the snarling dogs. The single thing that frightened them the most was the ordinary, everyday sound of two humans having a quiet conversation. Okay, you might think, but that's just prey animals being prey animals. Fair enough. So let's leave the savannah, head to California, and talk about the hunters instead. Mountain lions, pumas, 150 pounds of pure muscle that can bring down a deer twice its weight, near the very top of their food chain, and afraid of almost nothing. Researchers tracked these pumas in the hills near Santa Cruz, found one on a fresh kill it had risked its body to bring down, and quietly switched on a recording nearby. Not the sound of a bigger predator, not a rival cat, just the calm, ordinary murmur of a person talking. The puma froze, And then it did the thing pumas almost never willingly do. It abandoned its hard-won meal and slipped away into the dark, hungry. And these weren't wild pumas spooked by something strange and new. They lived right alongside towns and houses, they saw people constantly, they were thoroughly used to us, and they ran anyway. And here is the part that genuinely costs them. A puma that keeps fleeing its kills has to hunt more often just to replace the lost meals. So our voice alone quietly makes its whole life harder and hungrier and more dangerous. The one animal nothing else on its mountain can frighten, paying a real price simply because it heard us talking. When even the predators flinch, you start to see this fear was never about size or strength at all. It's about a reputation. And animals keep score of that reputation with an almost eerie precision. There's a quiet little study with badgers that shows it about as clearly as anything ever could. In the woods just outside Oxford, in England, researchers played wild badgers 4 different sounds: bears, wolves, dogs, and humans simply talking. Now here's the catch that makes it brilliant. Bears and wolves vanished from England hundreds of years ago. Not one of these badgers had ever met one, nor had their parents or their parents' parents. So the badgers barely reacted to the bears and the wolves. Ancient ghosts, those terrifying once, but no real threat to anything alive today. But the instant the human voices played, the badgers froze where they stood. Some of them refused to even leave their burrows to feed until our voices had completely, totally stopped. They weren't fleeing some old instinct baked in long ago. They were fleeing the predator that is genuinely currently out there, the one still doing the killing, us. Because fear, it turns out, isn't a fixed and ancient thing. It quietly updates itself. It tracks whoever is actually dangerous right now, and almost everywhere on this planet right now, that is us. So we finally arrive at the real question sitting underneath all of this. Why us? What on earth did we ever do to earn a fear that runs deeper than the fear of a lion? The answer is hidden in how we kill, and it is not like anything else that has ever lived. A lion has to get close. It has to risk its own body in the fight, win or lose, and it only bothers to hunt at all when it is genuinely hungry. We don't play by any of those rules. We kill from a distance. We kill in coordinated groups. We kill with tools, whether we are hungry or not, and we almost never lose. When scientists actually added up the global toll, the numbers were staggering. We kill medium-sized predators at roughly 5 times the rate their own natural predators do. And the great carnivores, the lions, the wolves, the bears themselves, we kill at something like 9 times the rate anything else in nature ever manages. No predator in the entire history of this planet has ever killed the way we do. So biologists gave us a title that fits, the super predator. From an animal's point of view, then, we aren't really just one more creature sharing the land. We're a force of nature, a kind of danger evolution simply never built them to survive. And we don't even have to be hunting to set it off. A hiker on a trail, a camper, a voice carrying across a valley, the fear treats all of it the same. To them, any human at all could be the one that kills. And it isn't confined to one savanna or one English wood. Study after study now finds the same thing worldwide. A vast, invisible shadow of human fear lying across nearly every land animal alive. So their fear of us isn't a mistake, or an overreaction, or some quaint superstition. It is the single most accurate read of the world they could possibly have. But here is how we know for certain that this fear is something learned, and not just something they are born with. Because there are animals out there that aren't afraid of us in the slightest. On remote islands where animals evolved for ages with no predators at all and had never once seen a human, something strange and almost lovely happens. They simply let you walk right up to them. When Charles Darwin first reached the Galapagos Islands almost 2 centuries ago, the birds didn't flee from him at all. He wrote that he could practically reach out and lift them off the branch by hand, and he understood he was looking at something profound. Fear of humans, he realized, is not something an animal is born with, it is learned. He called it an acquired instinct, and that beautiful fearlessness is exactly what dooms them. Bring a single cat, a few rats, or a handful of hungry sailors to an island like that, and animals with no fear and nowhere to run can vanish almost overnight. Which means every single frightened animal we have talked about so far had to learn to fear us. We taught them, every one terrible encounter, one lost generation, at a time. And the animals that never got the lesson in time? There was a bird called the dodo. It lived on one island, with no predators. and it had never in its whole history learned to be afraid of anything. So when the first sailors stepped ashore, it walked right up to greet them. In less than a single century, the dodo was gone, every last one of them, completely and forever. And that is the unbearable twist hiding inside all of this. The fear we put into wild animals is the very thing keeping them alive. The ones who still trust us are almost always the ones we lose first. Now let me turn this whole thing around for a moment, because there is a part of it that you already understand perfectly, from the inside. Think about walking alone to your car across a dark, empty parking lot at night. That cold little prickle climbing up the back of your neck. The sudden total certainty that something is behind you. Nothing is there. You know nothing is there, and yet your whole body floods with the exact same fear those animals feel standing at that waterhole in the dark. Because we were prey once, too. For the vast majority of our story, something out in that darkness really was hunting us, and the ones who felt the fear are the ones who lived to become us. That ancient alarm never switched off. We just aim it at parking garages and creaking hallways now, instead of leopards and hyenas waiting in the night. So when a wild animal freezes at the sound of your voice, you are not looking at hatred, or even really at you. You're looking at the most familiar feeling in the world. You have simply only ever felt it from the other side. It's no accident that children fear the dark more than anyone. That fear peaks at exactly the age when a small, slow human would once have been the most likely of all to be carried off in the night. The monster under the bed was never quite nothing. It's the blurry, inherited shape of something that used to be entirely real. A predator, waiting in the dark, that our ancestors learned the hard way to dread. And here's what makes all of this so much bigger than a single jump scare at a waterhole. We don't even have to lay a finger on an animal to reshape its entire life. Just being heard is enough. Our voice alone quietly redraws the map of where an animal will go, and where it now no longer dares to set foot. Whole species have shifted to living by night, moving and feeding only in the dark, purely to avoid crossing paths with us. Without ever firing a shot, we push them into the night. Scientists have a name for this. They call it a landscape of fear, an invisible map laid right over the real one, its borders drawn entirely by where we might possibly be. Animals caught inside it eat less, raise fewer young, and travel farther and hungrier, not because we hunted them, but simply because they heard us and chose to be safe instead of fed. And the strangest part is that the fear ripples outward. When a frightened predator stops hunting, the smaller creatures it would have eaten suddenly flourish, so our voice alone can quietly rearrange an entire food chain we never even touched. And it really happens, exactly like that. On some small islands off the coast of Canada, researchers did nothing but play the recorded sound of dogs to frighten the local raccoons. The frightened raccoons spent far less time hunting along the shore, and almost at once the crabs and the fish they would have eaten came flooding back. One recorded sound, echoing all the way down into the tide pools. We have become a kind of weather these animals live under, a low pressure in the air that for them never quite lifts. So here's what changes for you, starting the very next time you step outside. That bird that suddenly goes silent as you pass beneath it. The squirrel that freezes dead halfway up a trunk. The deer whose head snaps up the very instant it catches the sound of you. None of that is random little skittishness. It is a report being read aloud, in real time, a report handed down through generations that happens to be all about you. A warning passed from parent to child, over and over. For as long as our two kinds have shared this ground, a quiet warning with your name written right on it. To that animal, you are the single most dangerous thing in the entire world, and you were just out for an afternoon walk. You'll start to feel it everywhere. The hush that falls in the hedge, the flap of wings leaving a tree before you've even seen the bird. A whole world quietly stepping back to let the dangerous thing pass. So think back one last time to that waterhole out in the dark. The lion roars, and the animals flinch and tense, and they stay. And then we speak, softly, kindly, about absolutely nothing at all, and the entire wild world quietly empties out around us. We never grew the claws. We never grew the fangs. We are slow and soft, and most of the time we genuinely mean no harm to anything at all. And still, somehow, against every rule the wild has ever run on, we became the most frightening thing that has ever walked this earth. But the fear in their eyes was never really an insult. It's closer to a portrait, a picture of us, drawn patiently over thousands of years by every creature we have ever hunted. So here's something small to try this week. On your next walk, don't watch the animals. Watch instead how the whole world quietly rearranges itself around you as you move through it. Notice the little pocket of silence that opens up wherever you step. That silence is the wild itself, telling you gently and completely honestly exactly what it thinks you are. If this changed the way you see them, do 3 quick things for the wild mind. Hit that like button so more people who love animals find their way to this quiet corner of the internet. Subscribe for more journeys into the minds of the wild. And down in the comments, tell me about a wild animal that once ran from you and how it felt in that moment to be the frightening one. I'm still out here watching. And the more I see, the more I understand that we were never really separate from any of this. We're just the part of the wild that everything else learned to be afraid of. I'll see you in the next one.